to galacticconnection.com, one of the most popular blogs on the World Wide Web today for alternative news. Stay tuned for the latest information on our world shift from enslavement to galactic involvement, as well as current intel on any blockages impeding us from our sovereign birthright. Knowledge and self-mastery are key at this time. Our commitment is to present you with the latest breaking conspiratorial articles, off-world messages, exopolitics, cutting-edge technologies and sciences, and also an ever-significant intertwining of spiritual support and metaphysical scope that one needs to dive down the rabbit hole in search for truth with balance. We are truly on the horizon of a new golden age filled with the promise for more love, worldwide peace, and accelerated intuitive skills, where every living being can exist in cohesion and abundance. It is whatever we envision and dream this new world to be. I say to you now, let's redefine the new world to the beginnings of our own precious heaven on earth. Galactic Connection is here to provide the pulse of Mother Earth through an eclectic range of interviews each Tuesday afternoon from 3 to 4:55 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Station 2 on BBS Radio, expanding your perspectives on how we can once and for all take back our freedoms, our joy, and our connection with our mighty I Am presence. Our intention remains true to connect hearts and minds everywhere in order to obtain global unity and galactic and universal acceptance. Our discussions will continue to cover anything to do with galactic society and our involvement with our galactic brothers and sisters. Our guests are experts in their fields, and our radio shows have been coined as some of the most thought-provoking out there. In addition to our daily blog, which runs 365 days a year, we also offer a realm of healing services such as our world-renowned implant removal processes, our spiritual past life clearings, our galactic violet ray alchemy from Alexandra, who shares in the lineage of Merlin, and other cutting-edge healing technologies. Check our site out at galacticconnection.com now, sending you a wave of light, love, and inspiration, and a personal hug and thank you for listening to our Galactic Connection radio show and visiting our blog today.
Hello everyone, this is Alexandra Meadors of galacticconnection.com, and this is the pre-recorded interview for November 17th, 2015. And I have one of my favorite guys and guests today, which is Winston Shrout. And I say that because he always has a sense of humor. He takes a very, what a lot of people consider to be a dull subject, not necessarily he, and he makes it into something pretty fun. And today I just want everyone to be aware this is a very important interview. I am feeling so much, I shouldn't use the word pressure, but I'm feeling so much initiative to try to provide solutions to all of you on how we can accomplish sovereignty. I mean, truly extract ourselves from being monitored and being controlled. And one of those pieces is the legal system. And this is where Winston comes in. Now, you know, a lot of people have said that he is one of the leading authorities in the philosophy of redemption of law. He's laughing, but see, this is his humility that's talking here. And, you know, it's really important, it says here, to understand the true nature of our present day legal, banking, and political system. Now, that's kind of an understatement, wouldn't you think? Because so many of us have been literally like mushrooms. I mean, we've been sitting in the dark for a long time, and even the information that we've dived into has not been accurate information. You know, Winston basically has spent countless years, I think you said 17 the last time I talked to you?
Yeah, 17 or 18 years.
Okay, so a lot of years have gone into his studies, and he has a very, very powerful understanding of law and the banking and the politics. And really just my opinion is today, I want to present to you a very simplistic view of maybe where to get started with Winston, why you want to do that, and some of the core definitions that you need to understand. So with that, we're going to go ahead and dive into this because we got a lot of stuff to cover. Now, I, for one, am going to ask Winston, about this. Okay, so I'm holding this up. Hopefully everybody can see that. Okay, I'm hoping. And this is reclaiming your status and assets. This is probably, in my opinion, one of the most important DVDs/CDs that you can purchase from him. And by the way, when you go up to his site, which is wssic.com, you can go ahead and cruise up there while you're listening to us. He keeps his prices really reasonable, as do I. I mean, this is not about the money. This is about truly, he really has a fire in his heart when you talk to him to try to assist you guys in being released and being free. You know that Galactic Connection, we're working on it from the etheric boogeymen, the implants, the healings, and that side of it. He's really going to try to help you from the illegal boogeymen, in my opinion. So anyway, Winston, I would like in all of your CDs and DVDs, you use the word technology. And I was wondering if you could clarify for everyone right out the bat what you're referring to.
With the word technology?
Yes.
Well, it's just a tried method to accomplish a particular thing. I mean, we have all kinds of technology, in regards to whatever. I mean, we have the farmers, we have the mechanics, and then we have, people like myself who are involved in some areas where we've worked to discover solutions to problems and then develop certain procedures that we call technology that would facilitate solving those problems. So that's basically how I look at technology.
Okay, so again, because people ask that question, it's kind of a little bit confusing for them because when they think of technology, they're thinking of a computer, a TV.
Well, that's electronic technology. And one of the things we try to avoid, or at least I try to avoid, when you hear the word technology, it's very similar to the word technical. And so what I try to do is be as practical as possible so that things are not technical, and try to reduce them down into usable things so that people are not too confused. Like I say, over the years, of study and development and all these kind of things, some of these subjects do get very, very technical. But, for the sake of everybody, what we try to do, or what I try to do anyway, is to break it down so that it's not that confusing. Because, if something is too difficult, people simply...
They won't do it.
Don't want to be involved in it.
Right.
So my hillbilly shtick is if a hillbilly can figure this out, anybody can. So
you're a pretty sharp hillbilly. Well, okay, now can you clarify in your own words exactly what your goal is with each of these processes? What is your overall mission and goal for these people as they're listening to this?
I think there's a phrase going around that's very popular, which is stand in your own truth.
Like that.
People would like to do that at whatever level their truth is, but in many instances they're prevented through a number of different ways, either through the legal system, through brainwashing, through television, or whatever. And so a lot of times, people would like to be able to stand in their truth, to be, people call it sovereign. That's okay. You can call it whatever you want. But the development of the technology and so forth is to assist people so that whatever level they want to ascend to,
I love it,
dimension, and then certainly they can do it.
I love it.
One of the first things I realized as I started to study what's known as commercial redemption was that you have to look at it from a metaphysical point of view. If you can't see it from that level, then it's going to be a quagmire of crazy stuff, just like what you watch on the television or something like that. And so people certainly need to look at some of these subjects, from a little bit higher level. For instance, when I lecture or do something like that, I'm speaking from a fourth, fifth, or sixth dimensional level, and then the people hear it at whatever position they are, and then as they listen to it more and more and more and more, then they start to
expand the way they see things, right?
Yeah, and so that's available.
Yeah.
That's available. I mean...
Well, when you were talking about redemption in law, can you define what you're exactly connotating there? Yeah.
Maybe I could give an example, a little experiment people can do at home.
Cool.
So the experiment would be to stand against a wall, with your back and everything perfectly straight against the wall, and then try to walk away from the wall. You see, you can't do it and remain perfectly aligned with the wall. In order to move away, you have to fall, recover. That's what we call walking. And so using that little demonstration, you kind of get an idea for how we make progress on the planet. And that is, if you want to move about, if you want to do things, you have to fall, recover, fall, recover. In commerce, we would say debt, redeem. Debt, redeem, because that's how we make progress in commerce. And so the concept of redemption then is to prevent you from falling flat on your face. Because if you fall and don't recover, you're gonna hit the carpet.
Right. It's not going to be fun.
Yeah, it's the same thing in commerce. If people have unresolved debt, then they're going to fall flat on their face in commerce. And we have millions of them all over the place right now that we're trying to assist and educate and so forth, so they can recover.
Sure.
One of the definitions of debt is that in order for a debt to exist, there has to be a redemption. And so when we go out here and talk about, involving ourselves with, with all these different things we're involved in, a true debt does not exist unless it's redeemable. If it's not redeemable, it's not a true debt.
Good
it's
point.
what we call toxic derivatives, and all that kind of junk. So anyway, as you start to talk about commercial redemption, what we're doing is helping you to put that foot forward so you don't fall flat on your face.
And the other thing too is you're really pointing out to all of us that we ultimately are in a commercial reality.
Correct.
That we ourselves are either the property, right, or the collateral. So I think that's a really big, I think that's another thing that confuses people is they tend to think of themselves outside the system, but actually we ourselves are the property.
That's one way to look at it. The way the system actually developed, our body is not actually the property, but it's the product of the body that's used in the pledge system to fund the system. And so I have no complaint about that, as long as my asset is used properly. In other words, the system we have is very viable, very workable until somebody says, hey, I need $1 billion over here to develop a bomb to go blow up some people over here in Iraq or someplace. And I get kind of upset about that. But as far as the flow of commerce and the system and the assets, how they're used and all those kind of things, I have no qualms about that.
Well, the good. So how would you define security for an individual when you're diving down into redemption of law?
Ask me that question again.
Well, how does one actually find security? How do they attain security within this whole scope and philosophy that you've involved yourself with?
I believe it would have to do more with taking charge of your own life and creating enough knowledge and so forth so you can defend yourself in the event, and it doesn't always happen this way, but in the event that you're attacked by some character, some organization, some corporation that does not have your best interest at heart, then how do you defend yourself, from that situation? So you set up a commercial security barrier or whatever, and this DVD that you're pointing to here that you had reference to is one very good way to set up a defensive perimeter that would be very effective in many instances.
Interesting. And, you just brought up something, a flash in my mind, which is basically we don't have security if we don't have any knowledge about how to truly maneuver through this.
That's true.
So basically that's why we feel so insecure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a looping situation. Now, one of the comments that you made in your DVD was working as people rather than as fictions. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, let's go back a little bit. I think a lot of people are familiar with the term common law.
Yes.
Common law only looks to the past. In other words, common law is based upon history, usage, precedents, and all those kind of things. But as you move along from time to time, a situation will arise that has not been dealt with before. So what do? So in order to deal with that under the common law, they have to create a fiction. Okay? Now they use the fiction to get past that moment in time, because once they get down the road, now we have history, precedents, and those other things that we can rely upon. And so in the law, fictions are very, very useful. Otherwise, they'd just be simply too blocked and couldn't go anywhere. There'd be no remedy. There'd be no solution to the problem if they only relied upon what had happened in the past. So we create fictions in law. Now, you might look at it as we talk about, for instance, you remember that movie years ago, Peter Pan?
Yes.
Oh, and that Peter Pan was flying around, and his shadow was following him around and all that kind of stuff, and all of a sudden the shadow broke loose, going all over the place. So he was chasing it down, or actually a turd. Anyway, he was chasing it down, trying to get that shadow back. When he finally got it, he sewed it back to the bottom of his feet so he couldn't get away. All right. We have a very similar situation to that here in recent times. In other words, to accommodate changes in commerce, to accommodate the changes in money and so forth, to facilitate the vast number of people that are on the planet, shadows were created. Now, unfortunately, those shadows, kind of like in the Peter Pan example, those shadows have unattached themselves and are basically just flying all over the place. Now, does that create an injury to people? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But when it does create an injury to people, then we have to go and gather that shadow in and reattach it. Because after everything is said and done, everything exists in the real world. And sometimes entities that have, shall we say, evil intents will misuse the system, the shadow, for instance, the fiction, in a way that tears down society, that tears down commerce rather than build it up. Because again, the shadow was created as a remedy for something that was not provided for in the law. And so shadows are good as long as they are attached to reality. And so some of the work we've done with the technologies and so forth is to get that shadow reattached so that the real entity controls it instead of the shadow controlling the real entity.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I love it. And you're also basically referring to the straw man, right? In all capital letters, that's supposedly representing us as an entity, but is doing nothing for us, right?
Actually, it is doing something for you. We could get into that. That is, in fact, the basis of our commercial system as we presently have it. It is very much a necessity. But again, when that necessity turns into misuse by evil-minded people, then there's where the problem comes in.
Right.
And so we try to correct those things.
Yeah, because there's an awful lot of work being done out there to remove the straw man altogether.
That would be a real bad idea.
So this is another reason, folks, we're having these interviews, is to make sure that we provide you another alternative view to extracting yourself from the system. Here we go again with the word extraction. We're trying to extract ourselves from what we thought was reality, and we're now finding out that it's a total illusion, and it's something that isn't necessarily benefiting us in the way that we've been presented anyway. So now you talked a little bit about, and I should say a lot about, the U.S. codes and titles. Do you have a suggestion where people can go to get that in maybe a book format, something? Because it seems to me that if someone crawls into this work, they're really going to need to have a reference tool.
I spend about, about 2 minutes every year or so studying codes and statutes.
There you go. Interesting.
But maybe I can go and explain so people will understand about what we call law.
Awesome.
And that is, again, as I've spoken of in the past, when you start to talk about the word law, you have to go back to the original contract, because a law does not exist without a contract. Now, in the case of America, or the people that live here upon this continent, at least for the last 200 or 300 years, there was, in fact, a system of law set up to facilitate commerce. See, the whole purpose of the Constitution was to facilitate commerce. And so when we start talking about Constitution, you talk about Declaration of Independence, we start to talk about all those kind of things. These are things that are organic to the concept of having a country and then having that country protect the commercial interest of the people. Okay? So in every instance, a government is a fiction. But
interesting,
because the people have authorized that government, in consequence of that, there are certain liabilities which are created, which must be dealt with. And so those liabilities, which are technically, you would call it a contract, or you might call it a compact, or you might even call it a trust. Anyway, from the very inception, there were liabilities created for which the people were responsible, because they're the ones who authorized this government, this shadow corporation. All right. So the responsibility for those things were basically laid out and published way back when in what's known as the Statutes at Large. Now, as far as the law goes, that does create a liability in people. Right? There's joinder there because, again, the whole basis of the country and those things are based upon this is what the people have agreed to. So we have agreements, we have contracts in place, we have all these things. Now, so those are what we would call organic law, which have been properly enacted by the representatives that the people sent to Congress to do that very thing. Now, I want to emphasize the concept of properly enacted. If you go into your state constitutions, almost invariably it'll have a formula and certain words which must be included in any legislation that comes from your state legislatures or from our national legislature. And those words must be included in order for a liability to be created in people. If those words are not in there, then those proclamations, or whatever you want to call them and so forth, do not bind people.
Interesting.
Now, they might bind a straw man. They might bind a corporation.
Right.
But they do not bind people. And so if people want to find out what their liability is, then you would go to the statutes at large to find out what those things are. Now, somewhere down the line, somebody had the bright idea. We could probably do a little bit more, have a lot more fun out here if we go and create a whole bunch of statutes and codes. And because, again, the people were not generally educated in regards to proper law and enactments and all that kind of stuff, they just went along with it. And so as a result of that, there are 50 titles. And it's interesting, there's 50 of them.
Yeah, that is.
Might be some numerology going on.
Oh, big time.
But anyway, there were 50 titles. And let me say this word. Let me tell you this word. Anytime you see the word title, think fiction. The title is always a fiction. That's why I'm very careful. You know, I mean, I meet people. You know, it might be Dr. So and so, it might be Reverend so and so, or it might be, you know, and I try to avoid calling them that because I know that the title creates a fiction. So if it's Dr. John Smith, you know, I'll ask them, well, can I just call you John? Because I don't want to talk to them from a fictional point of view.
Right.
So it's just plain old Winston. That's who it is. You know, it's not King Winston or His Majesty.
Well, wouldn't even our names fall into that category as well?
Actually, yeah, if you want to go back into that, we could with further, but let's not divert this.
Okay, sure.
Take notes here. I'll take notes when we come back to the titles. But the reason I was bringing that up is because of the 50 titles of the United States Code, which have been created. And if you look at the very first volume, Title 1, in the preface, it'll tell you, hey, everything that follows is a fiction.
Oh my God.
It tells you right there in the first thing it is. And so you've been forewarned.
Wow.
Now, the measure of those codes is whether or not they conform to statutes at large, which create the real liability. You see, and I'll have to say that's why I spend about 2 minutes every year or so studying it. First off, let me help you out a little bit. Much of that is written certainly by attorneys. You can imagine what kind of language they use.
Yes.
But it was pointed out by one fellow that in order to understand the language and the terminology and the syntaxes in the statutes and codes, you would have to have approximately 33 years of education.
That's ridiculous.
Did I say 33?
Yeah, I noticed that numerology there as well.
All right, now, but he did give another key, and this is something your audience might be interested to try. He said if you really want to understand statutes, he said read it out loud backwards. He said it'll start to make reverse speech. He said just read it out loud backwards. He said it'll start to make a little bit of sense to you. And it does. So just try that little experiment if you got some free time, during your 2 minutes per year.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, but that's what it is. That's what it is. It's put in place to confuse, so that people have to turn to an attorney to explain to them what it is they're trying to say
exactly
in this fictional statute. Now, let me address the concept of bonding in this respect.
Okay.
And that is under organic government, statutes at large, Constitution, all that kind of thing. First, let me say that any corporation, in order to operate, must have a bond, which is a guarantee that if the corporation does an injury to a people, then there's a remedy that's provided. Now, in regards to our organic laws and so forth, they're bonded by the voice of the people. Okay? The people will be the assurance, the insurance for those things. But when you get into these other things, these titles, statutes and codes and so forth, they're not bonded. And so the only way really that you can be required to any kind of compliance to those things is if you agree to it. Now there's several ways that people agree. They agree by acquiescence or whatever. But anyway, those statutes and codes are not bonded. Now, just as a joke, it wasn't really a joke. I mean, I was making a point. Some years ago, I made a point to say, hey, we talked about insurance, we were talking about bonding and so forth. So I said, well, whoever holds the insurance policy, in other words, whoever is the one who insures something, they're the ones who are entitled to the profit from the use of that thing now, aren't they? And so a little bit of a hint was made there that, what would happen if you went bonded, an unbonded statute. Well, some of the guys over in England thought they'd try that out, so they did. They took certain statutes and whatnot, and they wrote a bond for it, sent it into the government and whatnot, because they expected to get paid on it.
Oh my God.
And so anyway, they did a couple of those, and pretty soon somebody from the government wrote a letter and said, would you please stop doing that? But they were just trying to help out. I mean, Jiminy Christmas, But that is in fact the case, and that is all these unbonded statutes and so forth are creating a great deal of havoc because the corporations that are creating these unbonded statutes and so forth are tricking and fooling the people. It's a bonding issue, and so we have all these strange things happening, and again, because people are not educated in these kind of things, with bonding, with insurance, and all these kind of things, it becomes very, very confusing to them, and so they take the shadow for reality when in fact it's not. And so many times people are tricked, they're fooled, or they get into all kinds of problems just because they don't understand. I think a lot of people like to quote the Old Testament there in Hosea. What was it, Hosea?
Hosea,
yeah. My people perish for lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
All the time.
Well, it's all part of the diabolical plan is to keep us ignorant,
Yeah.
And you said something. The people actually are acting as an insurance. That ties back in with the Federal Reserve note, where it's based on the trust of the people. Doesn't it? Isn't it kind of similar?
If you go to the last sentence in the Declaration of Independence, where those ones who signed that document pledged, everything they had.
Yes.
So that was the creation of what we call the Great American Trust. And so for those who subscribe to, for instance, the concept of the Declaration of Independence and so forth, we're actually involved in the Great Trust, and that trust asset, that trust corpus is us. Okay? And so, people really need to understand a little bit about trust law, a little bit about bonding, and some of these things to make a little bit of sense out of these things. Because, again, unless you have a need, unless you get confronted all the time, you never think, to take the time to study some of this. And so, as more and more people become confronted with a lot of these issues and so forth, they simply, don't investigate it.
That's so true. Well, and that's what these interviews are all about, is trying to bring forth the truth and guidance, because, we're all clamoring for answers as to how to really, truly attain our sovereignty. And, that goes back to what was the very first thing that got us in hot water? Was it truly the birth certificate, or was it the going to get the SS5 form signed?
Well, what you're calling the birth certificate, we call the short form birth certificate that has the name written in all capital letters.
Right.
That's what I call the death certificate. That has no meaning or no bearing unless you acquiesce to it by signing the SS5 form. In other words, the birth certificate could have been created, and if you never signed in for Social Security or any of that kind of thing, it would have absolutely no effect.
Interesting.
When you put your signature, an unqualified signature on that SS5 form, then all of a sudden you're starting to be construed as the trustee surety for that title, which is on the birth certificate as it's written in all capital letters or otherwise. And so that's the real problem, is subrogating your rights and defenses on the original trust, to a new cesta que vi situation. Now, I'm using terms here that people might not be familiar with, but I'm trying to throw out some words, for further study, that kind of thing.
No, that's good. Well, and you said that just when you have looked into reclaiming your status, you've been working on this for a really long time, and it continues to expand. You continue to get more and more answers, and making sure that it really does stick and it works. So how do you address the people out of the country? I know that's been a question. As far as can they apply? I know you talked about, for example, if they came into the United States and they filed for immigration, then those naturalization papers can be used as their birth certificate, yes. Right? But at what point, is everything that you're sharing with us applicable to every country on the planet?
Almost all of them. You have to understand. Well, let me give you a rundown so you'll see how commerce works.
Okay.
In order to create the funds necessary to accommodate 8 billion people or something like that.
Yeah.
They simply had to get away from gold and silver. You just can't carry on that amount of commerce with gold. There's not enough gold to do it with. And so they had to go to the use of negotiable instruments. Now, in order to operate with negotiable instruments, then all of the countries had to go into a corporate bankruptcy, because the currency of choice, if you understand negotiable instrument law, there's two kinds of negotiable instruments. One of them is promissory note, and the other is a draft. But the currencies that are in vogue and most popular in use in the various countries are on the note side, which are discharge items, which represent a perpetual or continuing debt. Okay, so our currencies across the planet are all debt currencies, all right, for the most part. Now, in order to accommodate that monetary system, the countries, the sovereign countries, had to create a shadow. They had to create a fiction government in order to accommodate commerce using debt instruments for transfer of energy. And so in order to accommodate that, then all the countries adopted pretty much the same program that exists here in the United States, with the registration of birth and the creating of these commercial documents that we refer to as birth certificates. Now, as an example, here in the United States, when a child is delivered, let me emphasize,
and comes down the canal. I couldn't believe it when I started looking at all the verbiage that they use. And is birthed.
Yeah. Well, anyway, when that new original issue comes, then of necessity, it's registered in the commercial registry to provide the exemption from taxation. Again, now, folks might want to go and study this concept of original issue. And there's some very esoteric concepts involved with that. And, we might go into that. I hope not, but we might. But in any event, once that application is registered in the commercial registry, then those foundational documents go through the Department of Commerce, eventually to end up in a private bonding company, which is known as a depository trust company. It's in New York City. And that bonding company creates the bonds to guarantee all of the debts of the citizens. Okay? Now, this is the same the world over. that is, the DTC accepts and receives and creates bonds for all of the original issues that come onto the planet, regardless of what country jurisdiction they're in.
That is very interesting.
Could somebody in France do this process in France? Yes. Could somebody in Taiwan do this process in Taiwan? Yes, you could. So could you do the same process anywhere? Anywhere, any country that has used the process to create bonds, used the depository trust companies to guarantee their money, their debt currency, and so forth. Yes, you can do it there.
Winston, this really is in alignment with any country that is part of the world banking system, right?
Correct.
Okay. Just wanted to throw that out.
Yeah, again, the monetary system, again, the particular currencies that are the most popular, and I say popular, that people are used to using, is a currency that is a debt currency in the form of a promissory note. And so a promissory note is a promise to pay sometime in the future. It is a discharge item. Now, on the flip side, of course, we have drafts or bills of exchange, which are set-off items. And in order to really explain that or how it works in our commerce today, we would have to have a little small class on acceptance for value, those kind of things, which we have explained in the past, so forth. But anyway, in regards to our conversation here today, we're basically talking about debt currencies. And somebody once asked me, he said, well, Winston, couldn't you clear all that up? I said, well, sure I could. But why would I want to? People want to use these types of currencies. They're used to using these types of currency. Why would I upset their Apple Cart? You see? And so, yeah, I do understand a lot of that stuff. For instance, it was back in 2008 when Mr. Obama came in and they had this problem with some money and they were trying to do some kind of crazy bailout thing, and somebody asked me, he said, Winston, why don't you go ahead and fix that up for him? I said, well, I will just as soon as I find out some kind of good number. I would send them a bill of exchange to clear that out because I'm capable of doing that.
Absolutely.
And so I was kind of hanging around waiting to see if they could ever come up with any kind of number. In the meantime, a couple of guys I know who did it. They went and created some bills of exchange for $3 trillion and sent it to Treasury. And I don't know if that was a good number or not, but they sent $3 trillion.
Hey, everybody, welcome back. Sorry, but they're doing some shenanigans with our pole for electricity, and I had a power outage. Imagine that. Anyway, so we're going to try to pick up from where we left off. And Winston, do you remember? I know we were talking about drafts versus promissory notes. You were getting into the drafts, and let me see. I don't even remember where we left off.
Well, let me review a little bit then.
Okay.
Pick up the storyline here.
Sounds good.
Back in 1933, when there was a change in the monetary system, we went to the use of negotiable instruments. Now, in the negotiable instruments, there's basically only two kinds. One of them is a promissory note, or a promissory to pay, which we call a discharge item. And then the other form of negotiable instrument is what's known as a draft or a bill of exchange, which is used for set-off of debt for settlement and closure. It's been very much like in the old times when we had gold. It had to do with execution of contract. Mm. So by executing the contract was closed, and so when you start to use drafts, bills of exchange, and so forth, it's very similar in as much as we're closing off the accounting because we have reduced the numbers in the account to zero. Now that's a little bit confusing to people because people are generally used to using promissory notes.
That's true.
As a form of currency, and that's okay. That's okay. I mean, I have no problem with that if people are used to it and so forth. The only problem comes in when the powers that be who are trying to control people with unredeemable debt. Now there's where you have the problem. And so from time to time we make an adjustment. I'll give you an example of it. Back in 2002, we were doing a lot of acceptance for value, doing a lot of treasury liquidation type processes and so forth. Whereas we took money from one place, put it in another place with a charge back to the Republic for the use of the Republic on the private side of government, not the shadow side, on the private side of government. And so that in that year, I think it was found that we had accumulated through acceptance for value and other things in treasury liquidation processes. We had liquidated somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 billion that was sent back to the private side. And that $400 billion was applied to the principal of the debt, not to the interest on the public side. And so somebody asked me, he said, well, how do you know that worked? I said, what's the prime rate? What's the prime rate? Now, the prime rate is the rate of interest that the big banks lend to the banks down the line.
Correct.
And sure enough, it dropped a whole quarter of a point, just on $400 billion.
Wow.
Now, what that meant was
very cool.
They could put more debt instruments into circulation. Okay?
Okay.
Because when the prime rate goes up, then there's a limit to how much debt currency they can put into circulation.
Correct. Right.
But when we did set off against the principal, that brought the prime rate down. So now, more and more debt currency can be issued legally.
Interesting.
And I mean, I'm not an economist, but I know a little bit. Now here, about 2 years ago.
I think you know more than a little bit.
Not really. Here about 2 years ago, I transferred 1.2 trillion back to the principal. So I never checked on the prime rate to see what happened from it, but we don't do that too much. Again, because when you're trying to stabilize the economies and all those kinds of things, you don't do any major hiccups.
Yes.
It just causes problems. It's a ripple effect down through the thing. And so, we have to be very careful about doing those kind of things. And so companies say, Winston, can't you get rid of all this debt? And I say, sure I could. But why would I? Why would I do that? Because again, we're trying for smooth commerce and everything. And if you go doing serious things with the debt currency and everything, then all it does is cause problems. So we basically just nip away at it. Different places and so forth like that. We try to teach people about negotiable instruments, proper use of them, whether it be promissory notes or bills of exchange and so forth. And so some of our acceptance for value technology deals with the bills of exchange concepts, treasury liquidation, some of those kind of things. And they're not really that advanced concepts. I mean,
well, I know you say that. It's just that it is really a whole new language for most of us. I mean, we're not dabbling in the words of, literally, we're not dabbling in commerce and trusts and deeds and bonds on a daily basis. We're really, it's not something that we're typically working with.
Yeah, that's why we don't upset the apple cart. Sorry.
Yeah, no. Now, you talk a lot about the private versus the public forum. Can you specify to the audience exactly what you mean by that?
Yeah, when we use the term private, we're talking about the real world, we're talking about people, we're talking about houses, we're talking about cars, we're talking about stores, highways, airplanes, and all that kind of thing. Now, when you start to talk about public, then you're starting to talk about fictions, which all fictions have a title. Okay? In order to be a fiction, you have to have a title, much like the birth certificate.
Right. So it's like a representation of the real thing, but it's not really a good representation.
Yeah, it's the shadow.
Right, it's the shadow.
By reality.
Right.
Now, unless you live in Portland, Oregon, if you go outside and stand where the sun is shining, the sun will cast a shadow. But in order for a shadow to be there, there has to be something to cast the shadow, and that's what we call the real world or the private side. So the shadow then, in our reference here, refers to what we have created as a fiction to accommodate commerce.
Okay.
These things are all necessary. You have to have them. You can't do business without them.
Interesting. I love your metaphysical scope of the financial and legal world. I mean, it's like, wow. I still can't believe it.
Let me just comment on that. It's what we have for right now.
Okay.
It's what we have for right now. Is there a better system? Yes. Do we have that better system right now? The answer is no. So we try to work within the parameters that we have to accomplish what we've been sent here to do. And so that's why education is so important. That's why we try to present as much information so that people will be informed, because you can't go on to something better until you understand what you got.
That is such a good point. And I also feel that if it's true that we are not only ascending, evolving, observing what's going on in this reality, in order for us to get from point A to point B, it's not going to go like this. We are so we are participating, we're involved in it, and therefore, in order to get from point A to B in any scenario, we have to have more knowledge.
Exactly.
We have to train ourselves, we have to teach ourselves, we have to have a vivid understanding, and I'm just really glad that you stressed that. I mean, it's important.
Yeah, see, that last seminar I did up at East City Ranch, the title of it was Removing Commercial Karma.
Yes, that's right.
Which has to do with unresolved debts, and people suffer with those kind of things. And so over the years, what we've tried to develop as far as technology is how to deal with debt and so forth. So yeah, it's one of the things that does hold people back is the inability to deal properly with debt. As proof of it, all you got to do is go look at all the credit cards flying across the country. Years ago, I was involved with some fellows in the business, and we were canceling out credit cards, using acceptance for value, and so forth. And the average client that came to us had at least 4 or 5 or 6 credit cards. I mean, damn, that person does not understand how to properly use debt.
Well, you know what? I was guilty of that too. I mean, I just feel so many people in the world have gotten to a place where it isn't like the 1950s dream that we've all been presented, that if you work full time and you take 10% of your income and you stash it away, you're going to live happily ever after. It's just, that's in a perfect world. I mean, if your car breaks down and your kid gets sick and somebody fell and you have to go in the hospital for a emergency surgery, I mean, you're SOL, you know?
So that's why we tried to develop this top technology.
Sure.
Like you mentioned, there are emergencies that come up. And so people get into these situations. You have to go to the hospital and come out of the hospital with a $20 or $30 or $100,000 bill or something like that. Can that debt be resolved? Yes, you can, using promissory notes. Very simple, and so forth. So again, the technology that we worked on over the years is to assist people in situations like that. We certainly do not encourage people to improperly use debt, but like you say, when you get in a situation, sometimes you simply you're up against the wall.
You got to do what you got to do. So you refer a lot to the assignment of reversionary interest.
Correct.
Okay. Can you go over a little bit about the acceptance for value language? Because you talk a great deal about the acceptance for value.
Well, that was a particular technique we used. What's being referenced here is what's on that DVD that you showed at the first, which has to do with the assignment, what we call assignment of reversionary interest in the title. The first time that title appeared in the public was actually on that birth certificate. Ever since then, every other public debt has that title on it. For instance, when they send you a bill from the power company or from wherever, it always has the name in all capital letters.
Good point.
So, when we wanted to do an assignment of liability for that title back to the source, then we simply used the birth certificate as a coverall. Now, you could have used anything else. I mean, you could have used a bill from the power company for all the difference it made, because that assignment of that title is what we're going for. So the responsibility and the liability for it is passed back to source, which is the one world government.
Wow.
And so we did an assignment to the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Treasury. So now maybe I need to explain that.
Yes, please do.
In our history, we had a cabinet position, formerly known as the Department of Commerce. No, as the Secretary of Treasury. Yeah. And then in 1920, in anticipation of the change in world finances and so forth, the Secretary of the Treasury was broken off as a cabinet position, and it turned into an international position, which is now known as the United States Department of Treasury.
Interesting.
Which is, in fact, you can just say it is the IMF. Now, the IMF comes right under the United Nations, which again is the one world government. It's not the New World Order. I mean, that's cabal. They're all trying to create all these New World Orders, George Bush and that bunch, which ain't going to happen. No. But anyway, the what's called the one world government, we've always had one world government. We always have had. It's the question of how does a country relate to that? And so,
good point.
Circumstance right here where we're reassigning the responsibility and the liability for that title that we took upon ourselves when we went and signed up on that SS5 form for that Social Security account. We're simply transferring that liability back to source where it properly should be. At that point, then me, the real party, does not have the liability for that fiction. That's what we're doing. And so we used the birth certificate, and we did use the acceptance for value language on that for this reason. In order to do something, you have to be the owner of it. In other words, you can go down and get a certified copy of your birth certificate, and you hold it in your hand, and you say, well, I'm the holder of this, what can I do with it? Not much. But if you look in your Uniform Commercial Code, in Article 3, in the 300 section there, it talks about holder in due course. And so as holder in due course, you have all the rights and defenses on that instrument, and at that point you could do with it what you will. So having done the acceptance on the birth certificate, that means that we are the holder in due course, and now we can do with that instrument whatever we will.
That's huge.
In our case, we're sending it back, giving the assignment back to the Secretary of the U.S. Department of Treasury, the IMF, the United Nations. A lot of people don't know, but the what people call a Social Security number, that comes from the United Nations. It does not come from the Social Security Administration. They don't have control of that number. So there's a lot of juggling of words and concepts that go on all the time to get people confused.
That makes a lot of sense, Winston, because when I've traveled to foreign countries and they're carrying badges, and the badges have their Social Security number on them, and when I've asked them, where did you get that Social Security number from? They're like, oh, well, we can't get paid. I was, wow. And so at that point, I realized this must be an international, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it comes from one world government.
Very interesting.
Liability back to the one world government for what we had assumed when we took on that responsibility by signing that SS5 form, which had, for the most part, it causes a lot of problems with people. When you sign that form, you literally become the trustee surety for all accounts associated with that type, which is the all capital letter name. And I would have to guess that probably 99% of the people on the planet don't know how to properly function as a trustee.
Yeah.
You would be the beneficiary. It's a whole lot easier to be beneficiary. You know how to be trustee. So most people probably would not want to be trustee. There have been a few. There have been a few who have wanted to be the trustee. For instance, I was working with a lady in Hawaii. She was doing a lot of stuff with real estate and stuff. And when she came upon this concept, she kind of took the bull by the horse because she did want to be the trustee. And I think she probably did a pretty good job with it. But like I say, 99% of people have no idea how to do that and do a pretty darn poor job with it, I'll have to say.
Well, I was thinking along the same lines as that gentleman that asked you the question, where isn't there even a more simpler way to go about this, where we can just go to the system at hand and remove these restrictions around our title, etc. But you brought up a good point, which is the majority of the people on the planet would not know how to maneuver, live, function, pay bills, etc. with that change. So I guess what I'm asking you then is, we are constantly talking about going into a new financial system, etc. How do you see that playing out on the level playing field amongst all of humanity?
Well, I hate to say it. People go crazy if I say it, but yeah, there would have to be, let's put it this way. If the people on this planet expect to do commerce with people from other planets, we'll have to have a unification of governments and money.
Yes.
We cannot have this diversity that we presently have.
Yes.
And so when we talk about, evolving into a usable system where we can do commerce with other people from other places and stuff, that's what will have to happen. I know, seems like, excuse me, if you recall some of the stories associated with Valiant Thor.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Strangus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I got the implications from some of the conversations or some of the reports, what Thor was talking about, what was a unification on the planet, even to do commerce or business with Venus, right here in our very own solar system.
Sure.
Because the indication were that the people who lived on Venus were in fact very unified and at a very higher spiritual plane than perhaps we are, but we could become that way. But in order to become that way, this diversity that we suffer with would have to be dealt with. Now that always raises the question, who should we select to be the one guy or the whatever? And we're not to that point yet, trust me. But
well,
we could be there.
Well, the other thing too is what I'm seeing right away is this was all very deliberate to have almost the hatred on the internet against a, quote, one world government, when in reality, if it wasn't being run by reptiles and others that don't really necessarily want us to thrive, it wouldn't be such a bad thing, because a lot of other planets are running their systems as a one world type of creation.
Yeah, I would suppose that to be the case. Now, when I talk about one world government, I'm talking about the surface people. You understand?
Exactly.
Lots of people that are not on the surface are living in the inner earth or hollow earth or whatever,
sure,
that kind of thing. And they don't do things like we do on the surface either.
No, they have their own system. Yeah,
they're very capable of working interplanetary with some of these other entities. So
yeah.
It's just the confusion that we have here. Well, first off, in our defense on the surface, we're part of a huge experiment.
Yeah.
We're part of a very huge experiment. A lot of people, call the United States the melting pot of nations. Well, I'll tell you right now, the surface of the planet is the melting pot of several colonizations.
Very good point.
And so if if those entities, wherever, if they can, and it appears that they have, because we have the federations of Light, the Orion Council, and all Andromedans, and everybody,
Guardian Alliance,
seem to come into some sort of unity. Then their transplants on the surface out here would be greatly affected by that, and it is possible that we could come to a harmony and a unity on the surface if we can get that influence, from the ones who colonized here. I mean, who was I listening to the other day? They were talking about the reason that Earth is so popular is because we do have 12 strands of DNA. It's very desirable from many perspectives, and so that's why we have so much going on here. So at some point there'll have to be a unification of the people on the surface.
Absolutely.
And I believe it can be done. I believe it can be done.
Well, you also said something about who's going to be at the top of the rung, but in reality, the most successful is going to be a council. A roundtable council where each and every one of them can only sit at that council if they're not corruptible.
Correct. That's absolutely correct. So people shouldn't be discouraged. We're getting there.
Yes.
We're getting there. And so if we can
totally agree with you.
Become educated at least to a certain level to where they're not suspicious of everybody. We get rid of some of these creeps and reptilians and Dracos and all that bunch and the influence they have. I believe that most people on the planet would love to work in harmony. They don't want wars. They don't want disputes. They don't want cheating and lying and all that kind of stuff going on.
Well, you know what, Winston? This is my philosophy. My philosophy is there is one particular group of people, whatever they are, it doesn't matter what planet they're from, that if they hold the divine spark, then ultimately, without all the overlays, without all the implants, without all the psychic attack and the demonic, vampiric energies, that spark is ultimately always of love, harmony, and a desire to do good things. And so I try to look at, those that are maybe on the attack or they're not acting in, let's just say, very kind manners towards others. I take a look at them and go, okay, who's running your ship? I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that the spark itself is bad, because it's not. And you also brought up another thing about the 12 strands. I mean, it's very obvious to me that the human DNA is the hottest commodity in town, and it's because no one has the capabilities and the gifts that the human race does. They don't.
Yeah, I've looked at and watched a lot of the presentations about people from other places. We've had colonies put on the planet, taken off, and all kinds of things going on. And I've come to the conclusion that the opportunity is greater here on Earth than perhaps it is other places. And there's a great deal of interest. You see, it kind of goes with the concept, the lower you go, the higher you can attain.
I was just going to say you have far more opportunity because of challenge. And because...
Universe.
Absolutely.
You got Elvis out there?
Yeah, no kidding.
There's nobody got Elvis out there. Nobody got the Beatles out there. We got it all here. So everybody's coming here. I'm just joking with you. But my point is that we do have monumental opportunities on this planet that perhaps are not as great in other places.
Yes.
And so our opportunity for growth and the heights that we can arise to is very good, very good. So people should take heart.
Well, and how many? We have backfeed. Anyway, how many of the planets actually have people walking around and they're from all these other different areas of the solar system? I mean, I'm sure it exists. I'm not consciously aware of that, but I know that here it's just like a hot spot, that we are literally walking amongst other galactic beings.
Oh, yeah.
They're all around us, including ourselves.
I was listening to this fellow, Tolak. I like to listen to him. He's got some good things to say.
Yeah.
But he revealed that the Andromedans didn't even have pizza. Introduced pizza to them. For crying out loud, what kind of organization do they have? That's all we got.
If they don't have pizza, we just have to say, forget it.
That's it.
You're such a good... I told you guys, he at least has a sense of humor. Okay, now tell us a little bit about, I think this is a biggie, and that is what happened after World War II with the Enemy of the State Act. How did that affect all of us? This is another real big thing that we need to overcome through documentation, etc., correct?
Okay, yeah. This is part of this program, that we're talking about here on this DVD.
Right.
And that is, we're seeking to stop being an enemy to the state and start being the Red Cross. Put it that way. Now, I use that comparison because we should be out here assisting mankind and not trying to tear it down.
Good point.
So if we can put ourselves in position, if we can demonstrate that we're not enemies, then we become the Red Cross. And you know as well as I do that the Red Cross is internationally protected. So in essence, this process that we're doing here is to try to put people into the position of being an internationally protected person. Okay, so that's what our goal is here. And if you reach that goal, to stop being an enemy, try to be helpful, try to do things to build up society instead of tearing it down. Now, if you go back to the Trade with the Enemy Act, actually I think it really started with Lincoln, with some of the things that were going on back there in regards to the Civil War, whatever it was. And then eventually when you get into the World War I and World War II periods, they further amplified or amended that particular title to prevent American citizens and American corporations for giving aid to the Nazis and to the Axis powers. And so, and then after World War II was over with, somebody had a brain fart, somebody had it'd be a good idea if they simply amended Title 50 to include all U.S. citizens as being enemies of the state, because they could get a lot of leverage that way. They could have a lot more control if people were considered to be enemy combatants, you see. And so that's what they did. So they arranged things. You can go study all that stuff. But in essence, what it ended up was that the concept of U.S. citizen that was created by the 14th Amendment to the Constitution.
Isn't that the illegal one?
Anyway, the concept was introduced of U.S. citizens. People were no longer citizens of their respective state. So forth, and so the jurisdiction shifted. That's what the whole Civil War was about states' rights, for crying out loud. They got into a fight, everybody killed everybody, but after everything was said and done with the 14th Amendment, they accomplished exactly what they were trying to do, was to take jurisdiction away from the state governments, which and the states were sovereign. The federal
that was back in the old days when the state had a lot of power.
Exactly. And so anyway, they were able to accomplish that with, number one, the fictionalization of the states and so forth. Let's see, I think it was, maybe it was Ohio, the last one that actually went into a corporate status. But anyway, around 1935, 36, and that period of time, all of the states corporatized. Certainly by 1960, all the states were corporatized. Okay, is that good or bad? Depends on your point of view. But what effect does that have upon the people?
Yeah.
And that's what we're dealing with here. And so then when the people, when the real, when the private, when that private became subjected to the shadow, instead of the shadow being subject to the reality, there's where the problems come in. And so the way things were arranged and the flow of events and so forth, that's exactly what happened. Is the people became responsible to the fiction. And that's exactly
the opposite.
Backwards.
Right.
Something there, but
well, everything in this so-called reality, illusion, is backwards.
Yeah, and so with this technology that's on this process here, on this DVD, we're going to reverse that. We're going to get back to what we should be. And so on the one hand, we're working on the public side with the assignment of reversionary interest to satisfy that problem. And then on the private side, we're doing what's called the Authentication Process, whereas we create an ownership document for this real estate, because that's all we are, is dirt and water, for crying out loud. So we're real estate. We just get to walk around and talk, all that kind of stuff. But anyway, we're creating an ownership document for the body, and then once we have the ownership document for the body and so forth, and do a few other things, then we give notice. We give notice to the Commissioner of the Internal Revenue, not the IRS, the Internal Revenue out of the Philippines, where they had initially intended to make the one world government. They moved to New York City instead. That's a lot of history. But anyway, once we give that notice to the Commissioner, who holds the master file as to the status, then our status is changed from U.S. citizen to non-resident alien, which is in fact a non-taxable status, which is what we were before we signed the SS5 form. All right, so we're going to roll back history.
Unbelievable. So ultimately, we all want to take ownership of our own bodies back. That's the bottom line in every way, shape, or form. And this particular process is pretty simple. I mean, it seems like there's only about, I don't know, I was looking maybe five processes, maybe?
Kind of like that, yeah.
And you said it would take about 30 days to do it, right?
If you get real fast with it, you get it done in 2 weeks.
And it doesn't cost that much money, right? How many filing fees are you talking here?
If you do it on the cheap side, you get into it for less than $50.
And if they do it, I know this question is going to come across my desk. If they do this first, are they going to get into any kind of hot water with anything else?
I don't know. Listen, folks.
It just seems like this should be the first thing they do.
We're recommending this to people who are responsible. See, we run into this problem all the time. We
Okay.
develop technologies, and we hope that the people who use the technology use it responsibly. Could a criminal use this kind of stuff and get away with it? In our present court system, they could. Because if you look at our court system, under the Code of Federal Regulations, they've listed every single crime as a commercial crime.
Wow.
Even murder. Now, pardon my expression, what the hell is up with that?
That's very, very enlightening.
So it's always a worry to us, to develop these technologies and things like this, that if the criminal element got onto this, could they wreak havoc? And they probably could. They probably could. So.
Well, you know what? In the bigger factions and the bigger scheme of things, they already know about this kind of stuff. If they have the money, they already are aware of how to manipulate and get themselves out of the system properly.
Well, they just simply buy the way out or threaten people with guns and knives and whatnot.
But I mean, Winston, give us an example of what you can. Let's just say we're not talking about murderers and thieves and things like that. When you say using it responsibly, give us an example of what you consider to be an irresponsible way of using it.
Well, let me give you an example, that happened to me.
Okay.
That demonstrate this. And that was one day I was driving my old pickup truck down the street and I got into a fender bender. Okay. Well, I didn't really like that old pickup truck that much anyway. But anyway, so I accepted the ticket for the responsibility.
Okay.
I said, I'm in the wrong here. This other car, I'm responsible for this. Give me the ticket. Now, the other driver of the other vehicle, needed that vehicle, for their, and I was afraid that if I didn't accept the responsibility for the ticket, that her insurance company wouldn't pay off on her car.
Oh, okay.
And so I took that ticket and went straight down to the court and paid it. On the basis, hey, listen, I could beat a traffic ticket. That's not a problem. But if I beat that ticket, would her insurance have paid to fix her car? Now, see, I'm trying to act responsibly here. Whether I was in the right or whether I was in the wrong was no consequence to me. But the problem was, hey, I don't care about that old pickup truck.
Right.
But I do care about her vehicle because she needs that to go to work or do whatever.
Sure.
Now, so I tried to act responsibly in that matter. If I had beat the ticket, I would have considered that I was acting irresponsibly, and I don't want to do that.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification, because I think everybody was kind of going, what does he mean by that? Now, you also talk about how basically everything that we do in this legal reality, if you want to call it that, is about making a claim. That we're actually constantly dealing with a commercial court. So help us to understand, where does the actual claim come into play? And I know you want to talk about the court system as well. You mentioned that in the beginning of the interview.
Yeah.
So where, in fact, is Alexandra Meadors making a claim? Where am I making a claim?
Yeah. Well, this is, in fact, the basis of this authentication process. It is making a claim based on reality. Now, as a part of that process, as you've gone through it, you've noticed that we do, even on the authentication on the private side, we are using UCC1 financing statements. And the reason why we're doing that,
I noticed that, yeah,
is to create an estoppel against any other claim in the Admiralty. Now, all of our courts are operating in the Admiralty, and in the Admiralty, the question is basically who has the claim on the collateral in question, whether it's money, real estate, cars, children, or what. So it's always who has the claim for the collateral. And so then, as part of the authentication process, we're satisfying the revised Article 9 requirement in regards to perfecting a security interest in collateral. Now, if you have a perfected security interest, then no other claim can be made against that collateral. It creates an estoppel. And so that's the reason why we're incorporating the UCC financing statement in there, to demonstrate that we have a perfected security interest. Because according to the revised Article 9, in order to have a perfected security interest, two things are necessary. Number one, you have to have the title. Number two, you have to have possession. Okay. Now, I do have possession. You're sitting here listening to me, aren't you?
Yes.
I mean, here's the dirt,
Hopefully it's a little clean, right?
Yeah, just a little bit. Anyway, so I have possession because you hear me talking. I can move around, stuff like that. So I got possession of the body. Now the question is, do I have the claim on the title? And so a lot of the process we're doing with that authentication is to create ownership of the body and the title to the body to perfect a security interest according to Article 9, because when you go to court, again, it's all about who has the claim.
So at this point, Winston, you're basically assisting people in not ever, well, I'm not going to say ever, but not being in a situation where anybody or anything can put a claim against them.
Correct.
Okay? So that basically they can live their life without the worry or the consideration that somebody might sue them, maybe, right? Put a lien against them. What would be another example? suit, lien?
From time to time, people call me up, parents or grandparents call and say, hey, social services or child protective, this come and took my kid.
That's terrible.
Like I say, I was dealing with some of the people up on the reservation there in North Dakota, and actually it was Chief Fast Horse, his wife, and I had this conversation, and they were taking kids off the reservation left and right.
Yes, I'm very familiar with that.
Oh yeah. So I said, look here. So I showed her this authentication process. I said, you get back up there. I said, you do this process for all your children. And I said, and then just dare them to take it. Just dare them to take it. And so this has many implications. If every parent in the country would do this process on their minor children, we would put an end to all this stealing of children and putting them into pedophile situations.
God, that's huge.
Well, it is huge.
That is so huge.
We've got to put an end to this kind of stuff without putting a bullet in the head of these idiots.
So what about for the children that, don't have parents and they don't have access to their original birth certificate? They've been kidnapped. Their parents are no longer around. They've been basically owned by some black ops faction. What about them? What would they do in this situation?
I'll have to say this, that as more and more people become exposed to these things, our morality level starts to move up and up and up. And when we start to insert the positive energy into the situation, their influence comes down and down and down. And so how long will it take us to get those matters resolved? I really can't say, but if you sit around and do nothing, they just keep going and going and going.
This is so huge. This is just so huge. And it's pretty simple.
Yeah.
I highly recommend.
Figure it out. Anybody can do this.
I know. My husband and I are looking into this right now. Please check this out on his website. It's WSSIC. Hopefully you guys can read that. Reclaiming Your Status and Assets. You show documents, right?
Yeah. Examples.
And examples. He's really good about that, I've noticed. And he gives a whole dissertation on from start to finish how to go about it. Basically, he gives you the assignment process, the authentication and ownership, perfection and recording, change of status, Q&A, title and possession, real estate, deed and trust, establishing ownership, and any more questions and answers.
Yeah.
Okay, how much is this? $99?
I guess you have to look on the website.
That's a classic Winston answer, guys. But everybody should be checking this out. I think this is just probably one of the most important things. And then, hopefully we can dive into the other ones that I know that are near and dear to your heart, like, let's see, authentication and assignment.
Well, yeah, but this newest one is the best one. Actually, we've discontinued that first one.
Oh, you did?
More information on the second one.
Okay, scratch it.
This. Along with that DVD, we show you how to do this same process for any real estate, including your homes. Back in 2010, I was given a certain appointment, and I was said, hey, Winston, I was told by the guy that controls the collateral accounts, Dr. Ray C. Dam. He said, I'm giving you this appointment to do certain things. He said, get back over there and get this stupid mortgage problem solved. Because it was an embarrassment. It was an embarrassment to him and to the organization he represents, because they underwrite all the mortgage banks.
Whoa.
They were pretty hot about how things were going on here.
Wow.
So they gave me assignments to get back over there and see if you can't get that thing solved. And so over the years, I've worked on a lot of different things to try to get that problem solved. And I think that if every homeowner in the country would use this exact same process on their property, we put an end to all these damn foreclosures.
That'd be fantastic. Now, I wanted to ask you this last time I interviewed you. Is there any kind of compensation for the renters out there in the world?
Give me a scenario. What do you mean?
I don't know. I'm just looking at myself and how I don't own a house, and I've put literally hundreds of thousands of dollars just to rent a space on someone else's property. I'm wondering, how does that impact the renters, because there's more renters today than there are buyers of property because of the economy.
Well, yeah, I would like to address that, but I'm afraid if I start saying things, people get mad at me. But we have enough housing. Well, first off, unless the party you're renting from has done this process and they actually own the property, they really don't. One of the things we recommend after doing that full authentication process on real estate would be to take the property and put it into a land patent, to take it completely out of the tax system and all those kind of things, because you're getting nothing, for your tax, your property tax and all those kind of things.
Sure.
Which is prepaid anyway. See, people don't understand how money's created.
That's very true. And what is the true benefit of being able to say, hey, I own this property, when they really don't own it in the first place?
Typically when people go down and buy real estate, they're not buying it, they're only purchasing a lien position on the title. That's all they're doing.
Good point.
And so, a lot of those things will have to be, redone and some of those kind of things.
But Winston, this is so important, not to interrupt, but this is so important for a lot of the spiritual, what do you call them? Just a lot of the organizations and the councils that are out there, including myself, that are gathering together to really try to put a solid project where the government cannot be intrusive, they can't pull anything from underneath your feet, that you are out of their jurisdiction. This is super crucial for especially the spiritual community that are really the trailblazers of this world as far as taking us from here to there.
Well, this is the reason. I started lecturing in 2004 as Solutions in Commerce, and I conceptualized that I would do that for about 3 or 4 years, and that's all I would need to do. But it turned out, kept going and kept going. But then all of a sudden, when in 2012, when there was a lot of excitement,
yes,
about ascension, uplifting, and moving into new spiritual heights and so forth, I realized that many who were working at those levels were still being bogged down by commercial karma. And so the consequence of that, I felt like I needed to get into that community. And so I have. Here I'm talking to you. Where did you meet me at? Up at James Gilliland's ranch.
That's right.
See? And so James has helped me to get popularized, if I can use that word, in the community of those who are working at more spiritual development and so forth. And then I come along with solutions to some of their commercial karma, so that they can be freed of that junk, and so they can move perhaps at a much higher and more rapid rate toward the dimensions and goals and so forth that they have. And so I purposefully inserted myself into that community so I can bring that message, hopefully that will be beneficial in the quest that people are making. So I think it's been good.
No, well, you're not going to get any argument from me. I think it's crucial. I mean, in my opinion, this is like the missing piece. Because there's so many people out there, we're all very well versed in sovereignty of our spirit, sovereignty of our connection with source, that kind of thing. But this is the piece, if you're still walking on this ground, you really need to bone up on how do you gain sovereignty. Now, again, please clarify for people. Everybody talks about how they want to get out of the system. And can you clarify your views on that and what you're actually helping people do?
Yeah. It is possible to get completely out of the system, but in order to do so, you would have to be a hermit.
Okay.
Hey, I've got a cousin, if he's still alive, nobody knows. He is a hermit. He lives back in the hills of Kentucky. Nobody sees him about once every 4 or 5 years, but he is a true hermit. Lives off the land, does all that kind of thing. All right.
Wow.
But is his development being stifled by being a hermit? And the answer is yes. I mean, he's antisocial. Mm-hmm. What kind of guy is that, So now, when we start to talk about get out of the system, is it possible? Yes, it is, but you would have to be a hermit. And so if you want to develop socially, if you want to have interactions and all that kind of stuff, you're not getting out of the system, but you're not allowing that fictional system to control the real man. And so we're not getting out of the system, but we're changing our status within that system into a much more favorable position so you can accomplish these other things. So I'm not recommending anybody get out of the system. I mean, why would you want to do that for? But what I am recommending is that you correct your status so that the system does not control you, but you are in control of you.
So basically, all of these documents that we have filled out or we have received over the course of our lifetime have all been kind of a shadow representation and have indebted us.
Correct. Yeah. And so again, when we, again, as our conversation was earlier about starting to do interaction with some of these people from other places and so forth, we do need to be social. We do need to interact with other people.
Yes.
We need to interact, at a level to where it's acceptable by these people from these other places, or we're not going to make any progress.
Very good point.
So I'm not suggesting doing away with the system. My saying is, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And,
yeah, you got a lot of heat for that one at ESETI. I know you did.
Well, Randy agreed with me.
I know Randy did, but everybody else was like, but that's the thing. We've been so inculcated regarding how we see the system itself, but you've pointed it out very eloquently that it's not the system, it's those that have been running the system that have not served us well.
The problem, then the next problem is because people didn't know what was going on. Like for instance, my grandparents, they worked on a substance money system. My parents worked on it until 1933. And so I was taught, the way my parents and grandparents thought, and then I was 50 years old before I finally figured out that that's not exactly right. So since that time, I've been working diligently to understand the system as it is, with the help of others. Hey, I'm not in isolation out here. I'm a student.
Yes.
I'm not a guru.
As all of us are.
Yeah, I'm a student. So I'm always trying to learn.
We're constantly learning.
But because of that, I have become convinced that the system that we have, if properly operated, will push us to new heights, so that we could start to go out and have these kind of interfaces with other planets.
So if someone was to do this process, this one that we've been talking about, they would be able to go and get an American national passport, right?
Yeah, I'm really sorry I brought that up, because it's a little bit more complicated. There are certain tricks and traps that are encoded into the forms and stuff you fill out. And so, and I can't say that I can adequately teach those things because I don't know all those tricks and traps yet.
Okay.
It's not necessary to have one, certainly. But in any event, for those that would attempt to do that, take the form home and study it, because there are traps in there. And if you don't know what you're doing with some of those things, then you won't end up with what you're looking for.
So what are you saying, just to use the existing passport until such time that you can actually get an American national passport?
Yeah, and along with the passport, some of the documents that you're creating here, certainly those authenticated birth certificates, carried along with you.
Right.
If you go through TSA and all that kind of junk, and they need identification, just whip out your passport or your driver's license if you want to. I don't use driver's license. As far as I'm concerned, that's junk.
Right.
But anyway, whip out your passport and also proffer your authentication documents. Just see what they do.
Well, I think most of them are like not very well versed, and they would freak out and have you be taken over to the side by some.
Be sure.
Say that again.
Be sure.
You broke up. Say that one more time.
I said, don't be too sure.
Don't be too sure. Okay. Huh.
Anyway, for instance, one of the things that has been changed when you reach this status with the authentication and so forth, and certainly you would want to go and convert all your bank accounts using the W8BEN form or the W8 form.
Familiar with
Because
that.
again, you're demonstrating that you are in a non-taxable status. And so then at that point, your bank accounts could not be attacked by the IRS or basically anybody else.
So, Winston, are you okay? Let's say you had a whole bunch of credit cards. Would you have to do this paperwork with each and every institution that you've signed a contractual agreement with financially?
I said bank accounts.
Only bank accounts.
Credit cards.
Okay, just curious.
Okay, now when you get into credit cards, you're into a new world, and people don't understand that. But what people call credit cards is actually a debt card. And what people call a debit card is actually a credit card. See, everybody thinking it's completely backwards. Let me give you this example. I've given this example before, but to illustrate that your thinking has been conditioned to think backwards of reality. Remember when I talked about reading the statutes backwards to make sense out of them? All right. You know, for people, if you want to do an experiment, go stand in front of a mirror and wiggle your right hand. And what hand is the image in the mirror wiggling? Most people say it's the left. All right, we'll go put a big X right in the middle of your hand.
Right.
Now wiggle it.
Right.
What is the image wiggling? It's wiggling the right hand. There's the X.
Yep.
Okay. Now, see, people have been conditioned to use a mirror. You know, the first time that you ever used a mirror, you could not use it. You had to learn how to use the mirror. But because of that, you're getting your thinking is a reflection. It's not reality, but you conceive of the mirror image of being reality when it's not. Okay, when you get into commerce, it's the same thing. Okay? You have been conditioned to think and act in a particular way. And that's why your thinking is backwards. See, that's one of the first things I have to do when I teach people about some of these things. I have to undo your thinking.
Yeah, the programming.
It's that way.
Yeah.
It's that way. You see, it's the mirror image.
It's incredible.
And people get up and swear up and down. Well, what's this is that? That's oh, really? Okay, how about this? Wiggle his hand here with a big X in it. See how that works out. See what I mean? So as an example, the people can do an experiment for themselves. Just do that. Just look and start to think about it. Study the physics of what's happening to that mirror image.
Yeah.
And there's a full argument that you can do with that. Yeah. One simple thing.
And if you look at the way the eye functions, it all has to do with a reflection.
Of course.
And so it's feeding right into that whole thing that we truly are living an illusion. Go ahead.
Yeah, we're all living a borrowed life. Now, a lot of people talk about the third eye. They think of the third eye the same way they think of these two eyes.
No.
But the third eye is not taking in light to perceive the thing. The third eye is projecting light.
Absolutely. Yes, very much so.
So that's a whole lot different. Light coming in versus the light going out.
Very good point.
When we become ethereal beings or ascended beings and all those kind of things, we will not be operating on borrowed light. We will be projecting light, and that's how we will perceive the things around us.
Can you just imagine? You know? Doesn't that just get you out of bed in the morning, just imagining living in that type of environment? Wow.
Well, you already are, you just don't realize it.
Well, I know that. I'm talking about going to the store and using credit cards and debit cards and having to pay tax on water and food and going to a gas station instead of just being able to hop in a ship and going from there to there. It would be so cool.
We're getting there.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are.
Over the years, when I first started out in 2004, started teaching some of these things, it was pretty much an uphill climb. But as more and more people became enlightened to some of these things, then we started to get into that 100th monkey effect, and we started to affect the collective consciousness. And so here in 2015, it's ever so much easier for me as an educator to put these things out. Yes. It really is. I mean, I've seen the change.
Yeah, I have too. Totally. I totally agree with you. Now, before we go, is there anything else that you really want to talk about? I know you've got an up-and-coming seminar coming up in 2016, right?
Well, the first one we're going to do will be the conspiracy cruise.
Ooh.
Yeah, we're going to, I don't know what represents these folks. They said, hey, Winston, we want you to go on a cruise with us. I said, what in the world for? They said, we want you to present your information on this cruise. And I said, well, what's in it for me? They said, well, 3 room, free board, and all the sunshine you can take because we're going down the California coast, down to Mexico. And I said, hey, that'd be a great thing to do. And so in that cruise, I will be making 3 presentations, one on the conspiracy of the court system, and then number 2, the authentication process.
Awesome.
And then number 3, how that same process can be applied to mortgages.
Perfect.
So on that cruise.
And when is that, Winston?
That's, let's see, the last part, I think I wrote it down. That's January the 24th through the 31st of January. If you're interested in it, you go to our website.
Okay, don't forget to check out his website at wssic.com, and you can find out all the good details on that. Sounds like it's going to be a lot of juicy information.
Well, it is going to be. They're going to have some interesting, Sean David is going to be there. He's going to talk. Carrie Cassidy's going to talk. I think, Laura Eisenhower is going to make some presentation. There's going to be a whole bunch of people talking, man, so it'll be really interesting to have a good time. One of the ports of stop, we're going to go out and get in a boat and go out and do some whale watching.
How fun. Good for you. You and Pat will have a good time.
Yeah, people look at me and say, hillbilly or a sea crew. Well, I don't know. I guess so, I'll probably take my fishing pole and be trying to catch fish.
You are too much.
Anyway, it should be a good opportunity. There's a lot of good speakers. I think a good portion of the speakers on that cruise are going to be working on healing and spiritual healing. We have some, apparently some good speakers with a lot of good experience in those areas.
Good.
Now, I'm just a course kind of guy. I'm out here slam banding, that kind of stuff.
Well, Winston, hey, God bless you. We thank you for all the amount of research that you're doing to bring this to light. And again, I just can't stress enough, this is such an important piece of our sovereignty. Check out this DVD again. I'm showing it to you one more time. Can you guys tell that I really feel this is important for you to check out? Authentication and assignment and taking back the ownership of your body. That is just key. And Winston, I would love to address maybe in the next interview the start about the courts.
Oh, we have a good time with that.
Okay.
I've got a lot of good stories on that.
Okay. So everybody stay tuned, and thank you so much for tuning in. Please continue to support Galactic Connection at the daily blog page. You can reach us 365 days a year. We've got a lot of cool stuff. We've got a lot of changes and really neat stuff coming forth. The Galactic Connection is literally in a growth spurt phase right now. And we are truly the hub of a lot of things that are going on. Lots of information. Even if you're not seeing it on the outside, guaranteed there's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, and it's going to be really beneficial for all of us. So I just want to thank everybody and thank Winston. I truly, really, I've done so much of this kind of work back in the 90s, and this just so resonates with me. It just, yeah. And I like the simplicity of the process and the fact that you're really looking at it from more of a let's just not tear down Rome kind of thing. Let's just use it to our benefit and be in complete control. So I think that's great. Did you want to say anything else before we go?
Yeah, one recommendation, when you get that DVD and you start to study it, I recommend just sitting down and watching it. First time through, just listen to it. And then go back the second time, start to take a few notes, and listen to it, as many times as necessary until it's internal with you. Just don't go do something haphazardly.
Oh, absolutely not.
So I recommend, listening to it, studying it, and maybe, 2 or 3 or 4 times as necessary before you call me and start asking questions.
So that's the ultimate message there. Now, hey, Winston, a lot of people do ask me if they need private guidance from you. Are you on a consult basis? How do you go about doing that?
Yes, I am. If somebody thinks they need that kind of opportunity, call the office. On the website, there's a phone number. Usually you can reach that number Monday through Thursday, sometimes Friday, but certainly Monday through Thursday during normal business hours. Someone will answer that phone. And so if you have some particular situation that you just can't quite get resolved and you think I can help you with it, then give a call. Something like that can be set up.
Right on. Okay, everybody, I love you. Please check out our website for the implant removal processes. They're world-renowned, as well as our past life clearing. Pretty amazing things coming out of there. And, of course, my Violet Ray Galactic Essence line. Keep posted on that. I'm going to be putting a lot of new remedies up pretty soon. So, lots of love, and we will talk to you guys next week. Bye.